A woman collected cans every day to survive, but when a passing millionaire recognized her, Margaret Maggie Thompson pushed her rusty shopping cart down the bustling streets of New York City, her weathered hands sifting through trash cans for discarded aluminum cans. At 62, Maggie's once vibrant red hair had faded to a dull gray, and deep lines etched her face, telling the story of a life filled with unexpected hardships. 20 years ago, Maggie had been at the top of her game. A brilliant corporate lawyer, she had it all. A corner office in a prestigious firm, a luxurious apartment overlooking Central Park, and a reputation as one of the sharpest legal minds in the city. Her specialty was mergers and acquisitions, and she had orchestrated some of the biggest deals of the decade. But life had a way of throwing curveballs, and Maggie's world came crashing down in a series of devastating blows. First, her husband of 15 years left her for a younger woman, taking with him a significant portion of their joint assets. Then, in a cruel twist of fate, Maggie was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disease that required extensive and expensive treatment. The mounting medical bills, coupled with the emotional toll of her divorce, began to affect her work performance. Mistakes crept into her usually flawless contracts, and clients began to lose confidence in her abilities. Within a year, Maggie found herself unemployed, her stellar reputation in tatters. As her savings dwindled and her health deteriorated, Maggie was forced to sell her apartment and move to a tiny, rundown studio in a less desirable part of the city. She tried to find work, but the combination of her age, health issues, and the whispers about her fall from grace made it impossible to secure even entry-level positions in the legal field. Desperate and with nowhere else to turn, Maggie began collecting cans for recycling money. It was a far cry from her days of negotiating million-dollar deals, but it allowed her to scrape together enough money for food and her essential medications. Years passed and Maggie became a fixture in her neighborhood, known as the quiet, dignified woman who collected cans. Most people barely gave her a second glance, their eyes sliding past her as if she were invisible. But Maggie held on to her pride, keeping herself as clean and presentable as possible, always maintaining a quiet politeness even when faced with rudeness or indifference. Little did Maggie know that on this crisp autumn morning, as she made her usual rounds through the city streets, a chance encounter was about to change the course of her life once again. A passing millionaire, rushing to an important meeting, was about to recognize the woman digging through the trash as someone from his past, someone he owed a great deal to. The day that would change everything started like any other for Maggie. She woke at dawn, carefully folded her threadbare blanket, and set out with her shopping cart. The early morning streets were quiet, save for the occasional delivery truck or early commuter. As she worked her way down Fifth Avenue, Maggie's eyes were keenly focused on the trash cans lining the sidewalk. She had developed a system over the years, able to quickly assess which bins were likely to yield the most cans with the least amount of mess. It was nearing 8 a.m., and the streets were beginning to fill with the usual morning rush of professionals hurrying to their offices. Maggie was used to navigating through the crowds, making herself as unobtrusive as possible. She had just finished extracting a handful of cans from a bin when she heard a commotion behind her. "Watch where you're going," a man's voice shouted, followed by the sound of papers scattering across the sidewalk. Maggie turned to see two men on the ground, apparently having collided with each other. One was older, in his late 50s, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit. The other was younger, probably an intern or junior executive, looking mortified as he scrambled to gather the papers he'd dropped. Without thinking, Maggie moved to help, her instincts from her previous life kicking in. She began collecting the scattered documents, quickly organizing them as she went. As she handed the stack to the younger man, her eyes met those of the older gentleman. For a moment, they both froze, a flicker of recognition passing between them. "Maggie? Maggie Thompson?" the man said, his voice a mixture of disbelief and shock. Maggie felt her heart skip a beat as she realized who she was looking at. "Mr. Harrington? Robert Harrington?" Robert Harrington was one of the most successful venture capitalists in the country, known for his shrewd investments and philanthropic work. But to Maggie, he was the young, ambitious businessman she had helped 25 years ago when she was at the height of her career. "My God, Maggie, is it really you?" Robert said, his eyes taking in her appearance with growing concern. What happened?" Maggie felt a flush of shame creep up her neck. Here she was, digging through trash in front of a man she had once advised on multi-million-dollar deals. She straightened up, trying to muster what dignity she could. "Life happened, Mr. Harrington," she said quietly. Things didn't go as planned." Robert seemed to shake himself out of his shock. He turned to the young man who was still standing there, looking confused. "Jenkins, reschedule my morning meetings. Something important has come up." Despite Maggie's protests, Robert insisted on taking her to a nearby cafe. As they sat down, the contrast between them couldn't have been starker. Robert in his expensive suit, Maggie in her worn, albeit clean, second-hand clothes. "Maggie, I can't believe... the last I heard, you were still one of the top lawyers in the city," Robert began, his voice filled with genuine concern. Slowly, haltingly, Maggie began to tell her story. She spoke of her divorce, her illness, the loss of her job and reputation. As she talked, she could see the shock and sadness in Robert's eyes. "But Maggie, why didn't you reach out? Surely there were people who could have helped," Robert asked. Maggie gave a sad smile. "Pride, I suppose, and shame. By the time I realized how bad things had gotten, it felt like it was too late. Everyone I knew had moved on, and I didn't want to be a burden." Robert shook his head, a look of determination settling on his face. "No, this won't do. Maggie, do you remember the Stellar Communications deal?" Maggie nodded, confused by the sudden change in topic. The Stellar Communications merger had been one of the biggest deals of her career, and it had been Robert's company that had acquired the telecommunications giant. "That deal made me my first $100 million, Robert said. "And it wouldn't have happened without your brilliant legal work. You saved my ass when Stellar tried to back out at the last minute. I've always felt I owed you for that." Maggie started to protest, to say that she had just been doing her job, but Robert held up a hand to stop her. "I have a proposition for you, Maggie. I'm setting up a new foundation focused on helping professionals who've fallen on hard times due to health issues or other circumstances beyond their control. I need someone to run it, someone who understands firsthand what these people are going through. I want that someone to be you." Maggie sat there, stunned. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as the implication of Robert's words sank in. But I haven't practiced law in years. My license, my reputation." Maggie stammered. Robert leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Your experience, both professional and personal, is exactly what this foundation needs. You've been on both sides, Maggie. You understand the corporate world, and you understand struggle. That's invaluable." As Maggie sat there, tears welling in her eyes, she realized that this chance encounter, born from her daily struggle to survive, might just be the lifeline she had long since stopped hoping for. In the days following her unexpected reunion with Robert Harrington, Maggie found herself in a whirlwind of activity and emotion. Robert had insisted on putting her up in a comfortable hotel while they worked out the details of his proposition. For Maggie, who had grown accustomed to sleeping on a thin mattress in a drafty studio, the plush bed and hot shower felt like unimaginable luxuries. As they delved into the planning for the foundation, Maggie made a startling discovery about herself. Despite years of hardship and isolation, her sharp legal mind was still intact. As Robert outlined his vision for the foundation, Maggie found herself automatically thinking of potential legal structures, tax implications, and governance issues. "You haven't lost your touch, Maggie," Robert remarked with a smile as she expertly dissected a complex regulatory issue. "If anything, I'd say your skills have been honed by your experiences." This realization was both exhilarating and terrifying for Maggie. On one hand, it gave her a renewed sense of self-worth and purpose. On the other, it forced her to confront the years she had lost, the potential that had lain dormant while she struggled just to survive. As they worked, Robert shared more about his life since their last interaction. He had gone on to become one of the most successful venture capitalists in the country, with a net worth in the billions. But as he talked about his achievements, Maggie sensed an undercurrent of something else. Regret, perhaps, or a sense of unfulfillment. It was during one of their late-night planning sessions that Robert made a confession that shook Maggie to her core. "You know, Maggie," he said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "I've been looking for you for years." Maggie looked up from the document she was reviewing, surprise evident on her face. "What do you mean?" Robert sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "After the Stellar Communications deal, I tried to get in touch with you. I wanted to offer you a position in my company, but by then you had already left your firm. No one seemed to know where you'd gone." He paused, his eyes filled with regret. "I should have tried harder to find you, but I got caught up in my own success, my own life. It wasn't until a few years ago, when I was going through some old files and found the stellar contract with your signature, that I realized how much I owed you. I hired private investigators, but they couldn't find any trace of you. It was like you'd vanished." Maggie sat in stunned silence as the implications of Robert's words sank in. All those years of struggle, of feeling abandoned and forgotten by the world she'd once been a part of. And all that time, someone had been looking for her. Someone who remembered her value. I had no idea," Maggie whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "When I saw you on the street that day, it was like seeing a ghost." Robert continued, "But it was also like a second chance, a chance to make things right." As Maggie absorbed this revelation, she felt a shift in her perspective. Her years of hardship, which she had seen as a fall from grace, a period of loss and shame, suddenly took on a new meaning. They weren't just years of struggle, they were years of learning, of gaining a unique perspective that now made her invaluable to Robert's new venture. This discovery, that she had not been forgotten, that her skills were still valued, and that her struggles had given her a unique insight, filled Maggie with a new sense of purpose. As she looked at Robert, she realized that this wasn't just about a job offer or a second chance. It was about reclaiming her identity, about using her experiences to help others who were facing similar struggles. With this newfound understanding, Maggie felt ready to embrace the challenge ahead. The foundation wasn't just a job. It was an opportunity to turn her years of hardship into a force for good, to use her unique journey to make a real difference in the lives of others. Maggie sat in the plush office Robert had set up for her, staring at the contract in front of her. It outlined her role as the executive director of the newly formed Harrington Foundation for Professional Rehabilitation. The salary was generous, the benefits comprehensive, and the job description tailor-made for her unique set of experiences and skills. Yet, Maggie hesitated. Accepting this position would mean stepping back into a world she had long since left behind. It would mean facing old colleagues, possibly even adversaries, who would undoubtedly have questions about her disappearance and subsequent years of hardship. More than that, it would mean leaving behind the community she had become a part of during her years on the streets. The other can collectors, the homeless individuals she had befriended, the social workers at the shelters who had shown her kindness, they had become her support system, her unlikely family. As Maggie wrestled with her decision, she thought about Maria, a young mother she had met at a women's shelter. Maria had lost her job due to a chronic illness and was struggling to provide for her 2 children. Maggie had been helping her navigate the complex web of social services, drawing on her legal background to interpret dense, bureaucratic language. If she took this job, Maggie realized, she would have the resources to help not just Maria, but countless others in similar situations. She could use her first-hand knowledge of homelessness and poverty to shape policies and programs that would make a real difference. With a deep breath, Maggie picked up the pen and signed the contract. As she did so, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders, replaced by a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. The consequences of Maggie's decision were immediate and far-reaching. Within weeks, she found herself thrust back into the corporate world she had once been a part of. The foundation's launch was a high-profile event, attended by New York's elite. Maggie, now dressed in a new suit, a gift from Robert, found herself the center of attention. Many of her former colleagues were there, and Maggie braced herself for their reactions. Some were genuinely happy to see her, expressing shock at her story and admiration for her resilience. Others were less kind, their thinly veiled judgments evident in their forced smiles and backhanded compliments. One encounter particularly stung. Maggie's former protege, now a partner at her old firm, approached her with a patronizing smile. "Maggie, darling," she said, air-kissing Maggie's cheeks, "how wonderful to see you back on your feet. I always told people you'd land on your feet eventually, though I must admit, I never imagined it would take quite so long." Maggie felt a flash of her old insecurity, but she steeled herself and replied with a calm smile. "Thank you, Jessica. It's been quite a journey, but I wouldn't trade the insights I've gained for anything. I'm looking forward to putting them to good use at the foundation." As she navigated these social waters, Maggie found strength in reminding herself of the foundation's mission. Every uncomfortable encounter, every judgmental glance, was worth it, if it meant she could make a difference in the lives of people like Maria. The professional challenges were equally daunting. Despite Robert's confidence in her abilities, Maggie found herself struggling to keep up with the rapid pace of the corporate world. Technology had advanced significantly during her years away, and she often felt out of her depth when dealing with the foundation's IT systems or social media strategies. However, Maggie's unique perspective proved invaluable in other areas. When reviewing applications for the foundation's assistance program, she could spot the signs of someone truly in need, understanding the pride that often prevented people from fully disclosing their circumstances. Her experience navigating social services allowed her to streamline the foundation's processes, making them more accessible and less intimidating for applicants. One of the most significant consequences of Maggie's decision came in her personal life. As news of her story spread, she was reunited with her estranged daughter, Emily. Their relationship had been strained even before Maggie's fall from grace, and they had lost touch completely during her years on the streets. Emily, now a successful journalist, had seen a news article about the foundation and recognized her mother. Their reunion was tearful and tense, years of hurt and misunderstanding hanging between them. But it was a start, a chance to rebuild what had been lost. As the months passed, Maggie found herself settling into her new role. The initial discomfort of being back in the corporate world began to fade, replaced by a sense of satisfaction as she saw the tangible impact of the foundation's work. She still faced challenges. The learning curve was steep, and there were days when the emotional toll of reliving her own experiences through others' stories was overwhelming. But Maggie persevered, driven by the knowledge that she was making a real difference. She implemented programs that provided not just financial assistance, but also mentorship and retraining opportunities for professionals who had fallen on hard times. Her unique insight allowed her to create initiatives that addressed the often overlooked psychological impact of career loss and financial hardship. One of the most significant consequences of Maggie's decision was the ripple effect it had on others. Her story, now widely known in professional circles, inspired others to be more open about their own struggles. She began receiving letters and emails from people sharing their own experiences of hardship and resilience. This openness led to a shift in the corporate culture of several major companies. Inspired by Maggie's story and the work of the foundation, they began implementing more robust support systems for employees facing personal crises. The stigma around seeking help began to lessen, and Maggie found herself at the forefront of a movement towards greater empathy and support in the professional world. However, not all consequences were positive. Maggie's high-profile position made her a target for criticism. Some accused her of exploiting her experiences for personal gain, while others questioned her qualifications after years away from the professional world. The constant scrutiny was taxing, and there were days when Maggie questioned whether she had made the right decision in accepting such a public role. The strain began to show in her newly rekindled relationship with her daughter, Emily. While they were both committed to rebuilding their bond, the demands of Maggie's position left little time for personal matters. Emily, still grappling with the years of separation and the shock of discovering her mother's hardships, sometimes felt sidelined by Maggie's dedication to her work. One particularly difficult evening, After Maggie had to cancel their dinner plans for the third time due to a work emergency, Emily confronted her. "Mom, I understand your work is important," she said, her voice tight with emotion, "but I feel like I'm losing you all over again. We've only just found each other. And now?" Maggie felt a pang of guilt and regret. She realized that in her determination to make the most of this second chance, she was at risk of neglecting the most important relationship in her life. This wake-up call forced her to reassess her priorities and find a better balance between her professional mission and her personal life. As she worked to navigate these personal and professional challenges, Maggie began to truly understand the complexities of her new position. She wasn't just running a foundation. She was serving as a bridge between two worlds she had inhabited: the high-powered corporate realm and the stark reality of life on the streets. This unique perspective allowed her to make bold decisions that sometimes put her at odds with the foundation's board of directors. When she proposed a controversial program to provide interest-free loans to homeless individuals looking to start small businesses, she faced significant pushback. "Maggie, be reasonable," one board member argued. "These people have no collateral, no credit history. It's too risky." Maggie stood her ground. "I was one of these people not too long ago," she countered. "What they lack in traditional qualifications, they make up for in determination and resourcefulness. Sometimes, all people need is a chance." Her passionate advocacy eventually won over the board, and the program was implemented on a trial basis. Its success in its first year not only validated Maggie's instincts, but also cemented her position as a visionary leader in the field of social rehabilitation. As the foundation's first anniversary approached, Maggie found herself reflecting on the whirlwind of changes that had occurred in her life. The decision she had made to accept Robert's offer had indeed changed everything: her lifestyle, her relationships, her sense of purpose. It had brought challenges she couldn't have anticipated, but also rewards beyond anything she could have imagined. Standing in her office, looking out over the city where she had once collected cans to survive, Maggie felt a profound sense of gratitude and responsibility. She had been given a second chance, and she was determined to make the most of it, not just for herself, but for all those who were still struggling as she once had. The woman who had been invisible to society for so long was now a beacon of hope for others, a living testament to the power of resilience and the possibility of redemption. And as Maggie turned back to her desk, ready to tackle the next challenge, she knew that her journey was far from over. In fact, it felt like it had only just begun. As Maggie continued to navigate her new role at the Harrington Foundation, a secondary plot began to unfold, adding depth and complexity to her story. This subplot centered around Robert Harrington's own journey of self-discovery and redemption. Robert, despite his immense wealth and success, had been grappling with a sense of emptiness and guilt. His chance encounter with Maggie and the subsequent establishment of the foundation had ignited a spark of purpose in him, but it had also forced him to confront some uncomfortable truths about his past. One evening, after a particularly grueling board meeting where Maggie had once again championed a controversial initiative, Robert asked her to stay behind. As they sat in his plush office, Robert revealed a secret he had been carrying for years. "Maggie," he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "there's something I need to tell you about the Stellar Communications deal." Maggie listened in shock as Robert explained that the deal, the very one that had made him his first $100 million and that he had credited for much of his success, had not been entirely above board. He had withheld crucial information from Stellar, information that would have significantly altered the terms of the merger. "You didn't know," Robert assured her, seeing the horror in Maggie's eyes. "I made sure the legal team, including you, were kept in the dark, but the guilt, it's been eating at me for years." This revelation shook Maggie to her core. The deal that she had considered one of her greatest professional achievements was tainted. More than that, it forced her to question everything about her new position and her relationship with Robert. As Maggie grappled with this information, she found herself in a moral quandary. Should she report Robert's past misdeeds, potentially jeopardizing the foundation and all the good it was doing? Or should she keep his secret, becoming complicit in a cover-up? This dilemma added a new layer of complexity to Maggie's journey. She had always prided herself on her integrity, and during her years on the streets, her honesty had been one of the few things she could cling to. Now, she was being asked to compromise that integrity for the greater good. Meanwhile, Robert's confession marked the beginning of his own transformative journey. Unburdened by his secret, he threw himself into the work of the foundation with renewed vigor. He began to use his business acumen and connections not just to grow the foundation, but to advocate for more ethical practices in the corporate world. This secondary plotline allowed for a deeper exploration of themes of redemption, ethical responsibility, and the complex nature of doing good in an imperfect world. It forced both Maggie and Robert to confront difficult questions about the nature of charity, the source of wealth, and the possibility of atoning for past mistakes. As news of the foundation's work spread, Robert found himself being approached by other wealthy individuals looking to give back to society. He began to see an opportunity to create a movement, to change the culture of corporate America from within. For Maggie, Robert's journey added another dimension to her work. She found herself not just helping those who had fallen on hard times, but also guiding the wealthy and powerful towards more ethical and socially responsible practices. This secondary plot created a rich tapestry of moral complexity, personal growth, and societal change. It highlighted the ripple effects of individual actions and decisions, showing how one person's journey could impact not just their immediate circle, but society at large. As both Maggie and Robert navigated their personal and professional challenges, their intertwined stories began to paint a larger picture of transformation and hope. The woman who had collected cans to survive and the millionaire who had recognized her were both on paths of redemption. Their journeys interconnected in ways neither could have imagined. The evolution of Maggie's relationships became a central theme in her journey, shaping her growth and influencing the direction of her life in profound ways. Maggie's relationship with her daughter, Emily, continued to be a source of both joy and challenge. Their initial reunion had been emotional, but rebuilding their bond after years of estrangement proved to be a complex process. Emily struggled to reconcile the strong, successful mother she remembered from her childhood with the woman who had lived on the streets, and then with the public figure Maggie had become. Their breakthrough came during a weekend retreat Maggie had organized for the foundation's staff and their families. Emily, attending as Maggie's guest, watched her mother interact with the team and the families they were helping. Seeing Maggie in her element, using her experiences to connect with and inspire others, Emily began to understand the strength and resilience that had carried her mother through her darkest times. One evening, as they sat by a campfire, Emily turned to Maggie with tears in her eyes. "Mom, I think I finally get it," she said softly. "All these years, I was angry at you for disappearing, for not being the mother I remembered. But now I see that you never stopped being strong. You never stopped caring. You just had to find your way back to yourself." This moment marked a turning point in their relationship. From then on, Emily became one of Maggie's strongest supporters, often using her skills as a journalist to help share the foundation's stories and raise awareness about the issues they were addressing. Maggie's relationship with Robert Harrington also underwent significant changes. What had started as a chance encounter between a former lawyer and her ex-client evolved into a deep friendship and partnership. Robert's confession about the stellar communications deal had initially shaken Maggie's trust, but as they worked through the ethical implications together, their bond grew stronger. Robert came to rely on Maggie just for her skills in running the foundation, but for her moral compass and her ability to keep him grounded. In turn, Maggie found in Robert a staunch ally and a link to the corporate world she had left behind. There were moments of tension, particularly when their visions for the foundation diverged. But these disagreements often led to innovative solutions that neither would have conceived of on their own. Their dynamic became a model for the kind of collaborative, ethically minded leadership they hoped to inspire in others. Perhaps the most surprising relationship development came in Maggie's interactions with her former colleagues and competitors in the legal world. Initially, many had viewed her with a mix of pity and disdain, seeing her as a cautionary tale of how far the mighty could fall. However, as the Foundation's work gained recognition and Maggie's unique insights began to shape corporate policies, perceptions started to shift. Former rivals reached out to collaborate on projects, and Maggie found herself being invited to speak at law schools and corporate retreats. One particularly poignant moment came when Jessica, the former protégé who had been condescending to Maggie at the Foundation's launch, approached her after a seminar. "Maggie," she said, her usual bravado noticeably absent, "I owe you an apology. I've realized that success isn't just about winning cases or making partners. What you're doing, it's real success. It's making a difference. And I'd like to learn from you if you're willing to teach me." This interaction was a powerful affirmation for Maggie. It showed her that her journey, difficult as it had been, had given her a kind of wisdom and influence that she never could have achieved in her former life. As Maggie's network of relationships expanded, she also maintained connections with the community she had been a part of during her years on the streets. She made a point of regularly volunteering at shelters and engaging with the people the Foundation was trying to help, ensuring she never lost touch with the realities of life on the margins of society. These diverse relationships created a rich tapestry of support, challenge, and inspiration in Maggie's life. They kept her grounded in her past experiences while propelling her forward in her mission. Each interaction, whether with a homeless individual she was helping or a CEO she was advising, reinforced Maggie's belief in the power of human connection and the possibility of change. As she navigated these evolving relationships, Maggie found herself growing in ways she never could have anticipated. The woman who had once been isolated and invisible was now at the center of a web of meaningful connections, each one contributing to her ongoing journey of personal growth and societal impact. The climactic moment in Maggie's journey came on the eve of the Harrington Foundation's third anniversary gala. The event was set to be a celebration of the Foundation's achievements and a platform to announce ambitious new initiatives. However, as Maggie was putting the finishing touches on her speech, she received a call that would throw everything into chaos. It was from a journalist, an old acquaintance from her days as a corporate lawyer. "Maggie," he said, his voice grave, "I'm giving you a heads up. We're running a story tomorrow about Robert Harrington and some questionable business practices, including the stellar communications deal. Your name is mentioned." Maggie's blood ran cold. She had been grappling with the knowledge of Robert's past misdeeds for months, torn between her loyalty to him and her commitment to ethical conduct. Now it seemed the decision had been taken out of her hands. As she raced to Robert's office to warn him, Maggie's mind was in turmoil. Would this revelation destroy everything they had built? Would the Foundation, which had helped so many people, be tainted by association? And what about her own reputation, so carefully rebuilt? She found Robert already in crisis mode, his phone ringing off the hook as news of the impending story spread. When he saw Maggie, a look of despair crossed his face. "I'm so sorry, Maggie," he said, his voice breaking. "I never meant for you to be caught up in this." For a moment, Maggie was transported back to the day on the street when she had been digging through trash, invisible and hopeless. The temptation to retreat, to protect herself, was overwhelming. But then she thought of all the people the Foundation had helped, all the lives that had been changed. In that moment, Maggie made a decision that would define not just her future, but the future of the Foundation and everyone it touched. "We're going to face this head on," she said, her voice steady. "At the gala tomorrow, we're going to tell the truth. All of it." Robert looked at her in shock. "But Maggie, that could destroy everything we've built." "Or," Maggie countered, "it could be the most powerful demonstration of our commitment to ethics and transparency. We help people rebuild their lives after mistakes and hardships. It's time we lead by example." The next 24 hours were a whirlwind of activity. Maggie and Robert worked through the night, consulting with lawyers, preparing statements, and completely rewriting the gala program. As news of the story broke, their phones were flooded with calls from board members, donors, and beneficiaries of the foundation's programs. When the time came for the gala, the atmosphere was tense. The ballroom was packed not just with the usual socialites and business leaders, but also with journalists eager for a scoop. As Maggie took the stage, she could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes upon her. 3 years ago, I was collecting cans on the streets to survive, Maggie began, her voice clear and strong. Today, I stand before you as the executive director of the Harrington Foundation. But my journey and the journey of this foundation is not a simple rags-to-riches story. It's a story of mistakes, of ethical failures, and of the hard work of redemption. Over the next hour, Maggie laid out the full truth of the foundation's origins, including Robert's past misdeeds and her own initial complicity in keeping them secret. But she also spoke of the genuine good the foundation had done, the lives it had changed, and the lessons they had learned. We have a choice, she concluded, her eyes scanning the stunned audience. We can let our past mistakes define us, or we can use them as a catalyst for real, meaningful change. The Harrington Foundation chooses change. We choose transparency. We choose to do better. As Maggie finished speaking, the room erupted into chaos. Some people were on their feet applauding, while others were already heading for the exits. In that moment, with the future of the foundation hanging in the balance, Maggie knew that whatever came next, she had made the right choice. The climactic revelation at the gala would have far-reaching consequences, not just for Maggie and Robert, but for the entire philanthropic community. It was a moment that would redefine Maggie's journey once again, testing her resilience, her integrity, and her commitment to the cause she had come to champion. In the immediate aftermath of Maggie's shocking revelation at the gala, the Harrington Foundation found itself in the eye of a media storm. The story of a millionaire's ethical missteps and a former homeless woman's rise to power was too compelling for the press to ignore. For days, Maggie and Robert's faces were splashed across newspapers and television screens, their every past action scrutinized. The foundation's board of directors called an emergency meeting. Some members were furious, calling for both Maggie and Robert to resign. Others saw the potential for this crisis to become a powerful example of corporate responsibility and redemption. Maggie, drawing on all her legal experience and the street smarts she'd gained during her years of hardship, presented a comprehensive plan for moving forward. We have a unique opportunity here, she argued, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. We can show the world that transparency and ethical behavior are not just buzzwords, but principles we're willing to fight for, even when it's difficult. Her plan included a full, independent audit of the foundation's finances and practices, the establishment of an ethics committee with external members, and a series of public forums where they would discuss the challenges of ethical philanthropy. Most controversially, she proposed using the foundation's resources to make amends to those who had been affected by Robert's past business practices. The debate was heated, lasting long into the night. But ultimately, Maggie's passion and Robert's willingness to accept full responsibility swayed the board. They agreed to implement the plan, with the condition that both Maggie and Robert would step back from day-to-day operations during the audit process. As they worked to resolve the internal conflicts, Maggie and Robert also had to face the external fallout. Some donors, uncomfortable with the controversy, pulled their support. Several partner organizations distanced themselves from the foundation, concerned about guilt by association. Maggie found herself working around the clock, meeting with stakeholders, answering tough questions from journalists, and reassuring the beneficiaries of their programs that the support would continue. The stress was enormous, and there were moments when she wondered if she had made the right choice in pushing for full disclosure. One particularly difficult moment came when Maria, the young mother Maggie had helped during her time on the streets, called her in tears. "I saw you on the news," Maria said, her voice shaking. "They're saying the foundation might close down. Maggie, the program has been helping me get back on my feet. What's going to happen now?" Maggie felt a wave of guilt wash over her. In her determination to do the right thing, had she jeopardized the very people she was trying to help? But as she reassured Maria, promising to find a way to continue supporting her, no matter what, Maggie found her resolve strengthening. This was why transparency was so important. They needed to be worthy of the trust people like Maria placed in them. As the weeks passed, an unexpected shift began to occur. The Foundation's openness about its challenges and its commitment to making amends started to garner positive attention. Ethics professors cited them as a case study in corporate responsibility. Other organizations, inspired by their example, began to examine their own practices more closely. Maggie's daughter, Emily, played a crucial role in this turning of the tide. Using her skills as a journalist, she wrote a powerful series of articles about the people the Foundation had helped, highlighting the real-world impact of their work. These stories helped to humanize the Foundation, reminding the public of the good it had done, even as it worked to address its past mistakes. Robert, for his part, threw himself into the process of making amends. He personally reached out to those who had been affected by his past actions, offering not just financial compensation, but sincere apologies. This humility, so at odds with his former image as a ruthless businessman, began to change public perception. The independent audit, when it was finally completed, confirmed that while there had been ethical lapses in the Foundation's origins, its operations since then had been exemplary. The auditors praised the current leadership's commitment to transparency and ethical practices. Armed with this report, Maggie and Robert called another board meeting. The atmosphere this time was markedly different from the tense confrontation of a few months earlier. There was a sense of cautious optimism in the air. "We've been through the fire," Maggie said, looking around at the tired but determined faces of the board members. "And we've come out stronger. We've shown that it's possible to acknowledge past mistakes and still move forward, to be a force for good in the world." The board voted unanimously to fully reinstate Maggie and Robert to their positions. Moreover, they approved an expanded ethics program that would not only guide the Foundation's work, but would be shared with other organizations as a model for ethical philanthropy. As the meeting concluded, Robert pulled Maggie aside. "I can't thank you enough," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Your courage, your integrity, you've not only saved the Foundation, you've made it into something truly meaningful." Maggie smiled, feeling a sense of peace despite the challenges that still lay ahead. "We did this together," she said, "and we'll keep doing it together. There's still so much work to do." As they left the boardroom, ready to face the press and announce their plans for the future, Maggie reflected on the long journey that had brought her to this point. From collecting cans on the street to leading a major foundation through a crisis, every step had prepared her for this moment. The resolution was not an endpoint, but a new beginning, a chance to take everything they had learned and use it to make an even bigger difference in the world. The resolution of the Foundation's crisis marked a significant turning point, not just for the organization, but for Maggie's personal journey as well. As the dust settled and the Foundation began to rebuild its reputation, Maggie found herself at a crossroads, ready to steer the organization and her life in a bold new direction. In the aftermath of the scandal and subsequent transparency efforts, the Harrington Foundation had gained a unique position in the philanthropic world. They were now seen as pioneers in ethical practices and corporate responsibility. Maggie realized that they had an opportunity to leverage this position to create even more meaningful change. During a reflective walk through the neighborhood where she had once collected cans, Maggie had an epiphany. The Foundation had been focusing on helping individuals, but what if they could change the systems that led to poverty and homelessness in the first place? With this new vision in mind, Maggie called a meeting with Robert and the board. "We've been treating the symptoms," she explained, her eyes alight with passion. "Now it's time to address the root causes." Maggie proposed a dramatic shift in the Foundation's focus. While they would continue their direct aid programs, they would also launch initiatives aimed at systemic change. This included lobbying for policy reforms, partnering with corporations to create job training and employment programs, and funding research into innovative solutions for affordable housing and healthcare. The board was initially hesitant, concerned about the political implications of such a move. But Maggie's conviction was contagious. "We've already shown that we're not afraid to challenge the status quo," she argued. "Let's use that courage to make a real, lasting difference." Robert, who had come to trust Maggie's instincts implicitly, threw his support behind the idea. "This is exactly the kind of bold thinking we need," he said. "It's time for us to not just help people navigate the system, but to change the system itself." As the board debated the proposal, Maggie felt a sense of coming full circle. Her experiences, from high-flying lawyer to homeless can collector to foundation director, had given her a unique perspective on the complexities of poverty and social justice. Now she had the chance to use that perspective to create change on a scale she had never before imagined. When the board finally voted to approve the new direction, Maggie felt a surge of excitement and purpose. This was more than just a new chapter for the foundation. It was a new chapter in her own story of redemption and impact. As she left the boardroom, ready to begin the hard work of implementing their new vision, Maggie knew that the turning point she had just navigated would lead her down a path of even greater challenges and opportunities. The woman who had once been invisible was now poised to make a visible, lasting impact on society itself. As Maggie stood at the podium, preparing to announce the Harrington Foundation's new direction to the press, she took a moment to reflect on the incredible journey that had brought her to this point. The woman she saw in the mirror now bore little resemblance to the broken, hopeless figure who had once roamed the streets collecting cans. Her experiences had forged her into someone stronger, more compassionate, and infinitely wiser than she had been in her previous life as a high-powered lawyer. The hardships she had endured had given her a profound understanding of human struggle and resilience, while her work with the foundation had honed her leadership skills and expanded her vision of what was possible. Maggie realized that her greatest growth had been in her capacity for empathy and her ability to see the bigger picture. Where once she had been focused solely on winning cases and climbing the corporate ladder, she now saw the interconnectedness of social issues and the importance of systemic change. Her relationship with Robert had evolved as well. What had started as a chance encounter between a desperate woman and a guilt-ridden millionaire had blossomed into a partnership based on mutual respect and shared values. Together, they had weathered the storm of public scandal and emerged stronger, their commitment to making a difference only reinforced by the challenges they had faced. Maggie's reconnection with her daughter, Emily, had been another source of profound personal growth. The process of rebuilding their relationship had taught Maggie the importance of vulnerability and open communication. She had learned to be not just a leader and advocate, but also a mother who could admit her mistakes and show her softer side. As she thought about the Foundation's new focus on systemic change, Maggie recognized how much her worldview had expanded. The woman who had once been consumed by her own survival now thought in terms of policy reforms, economic systems, and long-term societal impact. She had grown from someone who needed help to someone capable of changing the very structures that had once left her helpless. But perhaps the most significant area of growth for Maggie had been in her sense of self-worth and purpose. The shame and hopelessness that had once defined her during her years on the street had been replaced by a deep-seated confidence and sense of mission. She no longer saw herself as a victim of circumstance, but as a powerful agent of change, capable of transforming not just her own life, but the lives of countless others. This growth hadn't come without its challenges. There were still nights when Maggie woke up in a cold sweat, momentarily disoriented and afraid she was back on the streets. There were days when the weight of responsibility and the magnitude of the problems she was trying to solve felt overwhelming. But she had learned to lean into these moments of vulnerability, to use them as fuel for her determination, rather than letting them defeat her. As Maggie began her speech, outlining the Foundation's ambitious new plans, she felt a sense of peace and purpose that she had never known before. She was no longer defined by her past, neither her former success nor her fall from grace. Instead, she was defined by her vision for the future and her commitment to creating change. The woman who had once been invisible to society was now a beacon of hope and a catalyst for transformation. And as Maggie looked out at the sea of faces before her, she knew that her journey of growth and self-discovery was far from over. With each new challenge, each new initiative, she would continue to evolve, to learn, and to strive for a better world. As Maggie concluded her speech, the room erupted in applause. The energy was palpable, a mix of excitement, hope, and determination. She stepped away from the podium, feeling a profound sense of purpose and accomplishment. The journey that had begun with a desperate woman collecting cans on the street had culminated in this moment of triumph and new beginnings. But Maggie knew that this was not an endpoint, but rather the start of an even greater adventure. The themes that had defined her story, resilience, redemption, the power of second chances, and the importance of empathy, were now woven into the very fabric of the Harrington Foundation's mission. Each initiative they launched, each life they touched, would be a testament to the transformative power of compassion and the potential for change that resides in every individual, no matter how far they have fallen. As she left the stage, Maggie caught Robert's eye. He gave her a nod of pride and respect, a silent acknowledgement of how far they had come together. She thought of Emily, who was probably already working on an article about the Foundation's new direction, bridging the worlds of journalism and social change. Maggie's story had come full circle, from success to rock bottom and back again, but this time with a deeper understanding of what truly mattered. The woman who had once been invisible to society was now visible in the most profound way, as a beacon of hope and a catalyst for meaningful change. As she stepped out into the bright sunlight, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, Maggie knew that her greatest achievement was not the foundation or its work, but the lives she had touched and the ripples of change she had set in motion. In the end, it was not about cans or millions, but about the human capacity for growth, compassion, and transformation. And with that knowledge, Maggie Thompson, once a can collector, now a visionary leader, strode confidently into her future, ready to continue making a difference, one life at a time.